Okay, let's go through how to do PTC Creo assignment 6 here. So what you need to do is place all these in the assembly file. I've already extracted all the files to a specific directory, so I have them all here. If we want to take a look at the example here and see what it's supposed to look like when we're done, it helps in terms of knowing which way the pulleys go on, how they all line up, and so on and so forth. So with that, let's get started. So we're going to create a new assembly file. So I'm going to call this hamster assembly, since it's a hamster's car, hamster wheel there. And we'll say okay. And we get a new assembly. Now we need to start talking about what all we're going to place in here. We'll start with the hamster wheel, and then we'll move to the hamster pulley and the car body, so on and so forth. So the first thing we need to do is the hamster wheel assembly, which is right here. So with the first part, always put it in as default. Make sure you do this. First part always needs to be default in terms of constraints. It turns yellow, says fully constrained, okay. All right, that one was easy. Let's move on to the second one. And the second one is the hamster pulley here. So I'll click assemble and I'll grab this one. And this actually gets put on, let me turn off some of these planes here so we can see. This pulley gets put on here. And so this surface needs to be aligned with this surface. And that's coincident. And the axis that goes through here, so let me turn back on my axes. The axis here wants to be constrained with this axis. And that should do it as long as this one is coincident up here. So with that, we have a little problem. It mated it backwards. So under our first coincident constraint here, we can select flip. And look at that, we got it in the right spot. So that looks good there. We're gonna say okay. The next thing we wanna do is the car body. So we'll do assemble, car body. And what we need to do is place these, line up these holes with each other. So I'll do the first hole. We're gonna say that hole lines up with this axis here, and we'll make that coincident. And this axis lines up with this axis here, and we'll make that coincident. And it still can move up and down here. The rest is constrained. So the last constraint we need to do is this top surface and the under surface of this here. And we'll say that's coincident. And now it's fully constrained. We can say okay. Now let's work on putting the bolts in here. I'll do a symbol, and that's a 440 bolt. We'll put that, and the axis of that bolt, let's see if I can grab that, needs to be here. And we don't want it normal, we want it coincident. And the underside, let's see if we can grab the underside of that head there. Right up here, and we'll constrain that to this surface here, and coincident there. Okay, so we have the bolt there. Now let's do the other bolt. Let's put the other bolt in. So we'll say fully constrained, okay here, assemble, and we'll grab another one of those bolts. Now if it's hard for you to see, there's actually an extra window that you can pull up here. And it gives you this part here. So I can click the axis here and align it with this here. We could say coincident. And actually I can rotate this thing around and select the underside here and then select this. So, and say coincident there. So this extra window is sometimes handy if you're looking at constraining parts. Because you can rotate this independently of the actual assembly. And just to close that, you can do that. So it's just this button up here. Check mark that, that's fully placed. And then let's do the nuts that go on the bottom. So I'll click assemble, nut. Oh, and I think here might be a good place to pull up that extra window. Let's say this axis, we want it aligned with this axis. And this, whoop. Let's make sure that's coincident. And this underside here, we want it placed right up against this bottom surface. Okay, looks to be backwards. Let's make sure we have that coincident. And then we'll click flip under the placement window, and that should arrange it the right way. So okay there. Let's do the same thing for the other nut. All right, so the axis, oh, the axis to this axis, coincident, and this surface to the bottom surface. And we'll say coincident, and we may need to flip this one too. So under placement, we'll go flip. All right, so we have that taken care of. Now let's do the axles. So I'll click, let's see, wheel axles. So we want to constrain, get rid of this window, this axis here, click that to this axis, and it can still move in and out here. So let's constrain this surface here, and this is going to go on to the other side right here. And let's make that coincident. Check mark that. Let's assemble another axle. So the axis there to this axis, coincident. And we'll select this surface to that surface, and we'll say that's coincident. Okay, so we have the two axles in. Let's put the wheels on. So I'll assemble the wheel. Let's see, wheel, there we go. And we're gonna do this very similar to the axles here. We're gonna click the axis to axis and coincident, and surface here to surface here, and we'll say coincident. Now to speed this up, what you can actually do is copy and paste these. So I'm gonna do it, show you how to copy and paste. So I'm gonna say, let's see, I know it's Control C, I can copy and paste, but can I, oh, it's right up here, copy. And then I'm gonna paste another wheel. So I'll click paste. And what it wants is those two constraints. So it first wants the axis here. And then the next thing we click, whoop, and the next thing we click is the surface. And that should be it. So now we have another wheel, and I can click paste again if I want. And then again, we click the axis here, and then this surface. And we may need to flip that one. So let's flip. Here we go. So that's how you'd copy and paste, which makes things quicker. For the last one, I'm just gonna bring it in the old-fashioned way. Let's go wheel, and we'll click this axis to this axis, coincident, and this surface here to this surface, and make that coincident. Okay, we're about there. The next thing we need to do is there's a little pulley on the back end here, and we need to put that pulley in. So this is called the axle pulley, and it's right here. And we're going to constrain this very similar. We're going to first constrain this axis to this axis and call that coincident. And now it can still move back and forth this way. And there's a belt that aligns in this groove here and goes to this groove. So there's a belt. So we want to have those grooves aligned is what we want here. So let's align those grooves. And the easy way to do that, there's actually a plane that goes through the middle here. Might be a little hard to see. So let me pull up this other window. So right down the center of this groove, there's this plane. So I'm going to click that, and I'm going to line it with the plane that goes right down the middle of the groove here, which is this one. And we're going to say coincident. And that should align those two surfaces together. So they're directly aligned. And notice that there is a little gap in between these two pulleys, or the pulley and the car body there. So make sure you realize that. All right, I'm going to turn the planes back off here for a second. And the last one we need to do is the belt. So we'll put the belt on. So assemble, and where's the belt? Right here. Okay, so some people have trouble with the belt, and the thing is to realize that it does have axes that go through each one of the sides here, so we can align those axes. So there's this dagger here. We can turn that off by clicking here, and we can get this axis, and then we'll put it right onto that axis, and we'll say coincident. So those two are aligned now. And let's do the other axis at the bottom. So this axis can be aligned with this axis. And let's make that coincident. And the last one, it's still able to move in and out this way. So the last one we need is actually a plane. There's a plane that goes right through the middle of this belt. And we can line that plane up just with that belt groove plane that's over there. So I'm going to click this plane, and we'll move over here and make sure we get that one that goes right through the middle of that belt groove. There, and we'll say coincident. And check mark that. I'm going to turn off all my displays here. So we got four wheels, we got the axles in here, we have the pulley, the belt is aligned with the other pulley, we have the cage, it's fastened with bolts here, and there are nuts on the bottom side here. So I think that's everything. So that's how you complete the hamster powered car.